Hi everyone, and welcome to Alaska Weather TV show. Wow, we have a heck of a storm in the Bering Sea, so let's take a look. The way that system is all wound up, it's pushing a lot of water and causing a lot of wind all across southwestern Alaska and on up into the Bering Strait area, and it even has the potential to get some of the Chukchi Sea coast and all the way to the Beaufort Sea, even will be impacting Utqiagvik. Ex-typhoon Mirbach. It's a dangerous storm, very strong weather system in the Bering Sea. One observation so far, 80 miles per hour on one of the buoys with seas 52 feet. It's early for our West Coast fall storms. Our area of formation and the straight northward track does keep some tropical air in this system, and the system holds together all the way to the Chukchi Sea. So keep up to date, folks. The National Weather Service internet websites, you can get the details for your very local area. Also, stay tuned to NOAA Weather Radio, especially if you have power outages. And the Alaska Weather Information Line, if you still have phone service, 855-937-4977. Also, stay alert for information from local emergency management officials. It's very, very important that the community act in a coordinated way. So, looking at our warnings, we still have warnings out for the Pribilofs for high wind and coastal flood warnings all the way up from Bethel to Stebbins, and then Stebbins northward all the way up, including Shishmaref and Nome, and then we have warnings all the way up to Point Hope, and then a coastal flood watch from Point Hope to Utqiagvik. So here's a graphic on this, the coastal flood warning to 9 p.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday for the southwestern, especially looking at Kuskokwim Bay and Nunivak Island to Niwatak. And then also for a high wind warning for the same area until 10 a.m. on Saturday. And that is gusts 75 to 85 miles per hour. So the impacts could easily be power outages and possible damage to structures and blowing down trees. Also a high wind warning from Norton Sound and the Yukon Delta, 40 to 60 miles per hour, gusts as high as 90. And again, the same impacts, possible power outages. For a coastal flood warning, we have lots of areas where that wind is pushing that water up onto the beach and especially funneling it into Norton Sound. And as you can see, there's still a forecast for 10 to 17 feet in the upper part of the sound as you get toward Koyuk, and then Nome 8 to 11 feet. And this is really significant. This is even worse than the 2011 storm. So please pay attention to this. The impacts, beach erosion, any objects that are below the water line that could be swept out to sea, and of course impacting infrastructure in all kinds of awful ways. We have a high wind warning from Norton Sound to the Yukon Delta. And again, those gusts to 90. So let me show you the satellite image. It's very, very impressive how wrapped up this storm is in the Bering Sea. So as you can see, it's got an occluded front all the way around it. And I wanted to show you this true color image. So this was taken at 2 p.m. today. The system no longer has an eye-looking shape, but it is a well-formed, very, very, very strong system. This is a dangerous system, and as you can tell from the wind observations already, there is lots and lots to look out for on this weather system. So for today's weather, around 9:40, that low that's probably at its deepest point today. And then the occluded front all the way around, moving into western Alaska. A little bit of a cold front there. It's slipping south now of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians, with a little bit of warm advection coming up to Kodiak Island and the southern Kenai Peninsula. And then tonight, that system stays very, very wrapped up. The front occludes all the way into the central interior. The cold front has moved out into the Gulf. A couple of minor high-pressure systems holding the weather offshore for southeast Alaska around 10:21, but the low is going to weaken to 9:56 tonight. And here's a look at the wind field. As you can see, it's peaked out above 55 miles per hour for a lot of the beach areas, particularly Nunivak Island and Mercouriak and even Amonic and definitely St. Lawrence Island is going to get a real brunt of the wind tonight. And then for Saturday's weather, the system weakens again to 959 millibars. It's gone through the Bering Strait. The occluded front is all wrapped around and pushed along to the north slope. And then a very weak system is forming south of the southern Aleutians, weak troughing over into the eastern Gulf, but not a lot of rainfall except the northern panhandle. And then widespread rain and showers. Some of the showers heavy, and snow levels are going to be very, very high because our freezing levels are very high. And then for Saturday afternoon, you can see this wind. It's really pushing the water up into Norton Sound and still onto the beach north of Mercouriak. And for Sunday's weather, that storm weakens to 989 millibars. It's no longer really a storm. It's more of a gale force type low. It still will have a very, very slight tropical feel for it, but a new low has formed just east of the northern part of the Alcan, and so the old occluded front has now moved offshore into the Arctic Ocean. Also, we have a low that's formed near the Pribilofs, about 1010 millibars. It's fairly weak with a frontal system wrapped around it, and the Panhandle and South Central are getting a break. And then the winds on Sunday morning, as you can see, the easterlies really pick up offshore. And also there's still southwesterlies into Kotzebue Sound and also Norton Sound. So it's not over yet on Sunday morning. So our low temperature Saturday morning, mostly in the 40s, a couple of 50s in the southern sections, and into the 30s along the north slope. Afternoon highs, 40s and along the north slope, 50s for most of the state, all the way across the board there, except for St. Lawrence Island, 48. And then for our low temperature Sunday morning, we can see, again, in the 40s mostly, a few 30s in the north, and then 50s for our high temperature Sunday afternoon. Our 6 to 10 day outlook is still looking at above normal temperatures, mainly for the eastern sections of the state. There is some that gets into the central interior, but the best chance for above normal temperatures will be the Panhandle and over in the upper Tanana Basin. And then looking at our precipitation for that time, we do have a pretty good chance of above normal precipitation for just about all of the eastern sections of the state, and even a better chance as you get to the Copper River Basin and the upper Tanana, as well as over in Yakutat. And then for our 8 to 14 day outlook, a really strong chance of above normal precipitations for much of south central and over into the Panhandle. And this looks warm, mainly because the weather systems are pumping up warmer air from the south during that time. But that will also mean a lot of moisture too. So south central, pretty good chance of above normal precipitation on over into the Panhandle and for most of the mainland portion of the state. So really looking in the long term, it's kind of warm and wet. And then finally, just a reminder, the Juneau zones are changing. They're realigning on September 13th. So I want everybody to stay safe out there and pay attention to any updates and your local emergency management officials. Stay safe out there.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi everybody, and now for your aviation weather forecast. Starting out with extensive IFR conditions along the western coast of Alaska, as well as the North Slope. Also, we have some IFR in southwestern Alaska up to Kodiak Island, southern end of the Kenai Peninsula, and then out into the Gulf. Marginal VFR for a large portion of the mainland portion of the state. And then we have for Saturday afternoon, IFR again just off the North Slope coast, but some areas of VFR as you get inland due to the downslope off the Brooks Range. IFR along the southern edges of the Brooks Range, and then extending down to the Seward Peninsula all the way down to Nunivak Island. And then we have a little bit of IFR along the central Gulf Coast, starting out about the Cordova area over to Icy Bay. And then we have for Sunday morning, IFR again off the coast of the North Slope, but some VFR flying as you get further inland, and then it picks up again to IFR over the Brooks Range, as well as some IFR of Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, down near the Pribilofs, into southwestern Alaska, southern Alaska Peninsula, as well as the far eastern Aleutians and southern Kodiak Island. And then for Sunday afternoon, IFR again all along the North Slope coast, also into the central interior, including the windward side of the Brooks Range, as well as Seward Peninsula and Norton Sound down to Nunivak Island, also Kodiak Island, southern Alaska Peninsula, and out in the western Aleutians. So we're looking for a lot of turbulence in many of the passes, particularly the western ones, over the time period here. Anatovik Pass, IFR to VFR, turbulence in the afternoon for Adigan, IFR becoming VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, expecting turbulence, IFR becoming marginal VFR. Rainy Pass, IFR becoming marginal VFR with turbulence. Windy Pass, IFR becoming VFR with turbulence. And also turbulence expected in Isabel Pass with marginal VFR all day. And then Mentasta Pass, marginal VFR. Tanita Pass, marginal VFR. Portage Pass, marginal VFR. Chilkoot and White Pass, a VFR. And then for our freezing levels, a big slug of warm air moving up into the Gulf of Alaska up to 12,000 feet, but we still have pretty high freezing levels all across the western and northern portions of the state, and that's due to that old tropical system that now has moved up into the Chukchi Sea around 6,000 feet or so, so pretty high freezing levels. And because of that, we have the icing limited to above 5,000 feet for the North Slope and then down through the Bering Strait into the Bering Sea. And I've indicated an area of considerable moderate through the Bering Strait there with the tops at flight level 200. And then for our jet stream, we've got a west-southwest jet coming up 150 knots about the Dillingham area or so, tapers off to 135 knots as you get over Prince William Sound. A little second branch of 75-knot west-southwest jet over starting about Norton Sound or so and moving over to the eastern Brooks Range. And then we have, for our 9,000-foot winds, the remnants of that old storm. Again, 55 to 65 knots as you get into western Alaska, but it tapers off to about 45 knots for most of the mainland, and then fairly light winds as you get over to southeastern Alaska, and also the far western Aleutians. For 3,000-foot winds, again, that low-pressure system in the Chukchi Sea, just north of Bering Strait, 55 knots as you get into southwestern Alaska and on up the west coast. And then for our turbulence on Saturday, we've got a large swath of isolated moderate all the way from the Aleutians. That's mainly in the morning down there, but as you get into the mainland portion of the state, surface to about 8,000 feet due to that storm that's now weakening. And then indicated considerable moderate along the headlands, particularly for the Point Hope area, also the western Seward Peninsula, and all across the Seward Peninsula, including the Brooks Range and the Alaska Range. This, again, with those winds hitting that terrain, it's going to set up some considerable moderate turbulence there. Looking for the level of it, anywhere from the surface to about 8,000 feet. That's what we're expecting. So everyone be sure to file a flight plan. Be really safe out there with all this turbulence and IFR conditions.
Why is plastic marine debris so common? We know there's trash in the ocean. Unfortunately, a lot of it is plastic. We find plastic everywhere, from the ocean floor to surface. The plastics are all shapes and sizes and all different types. We find plastics on beaches, and also inside animals' stomachs or wrapped around their bodies. That's bad news for our ocean and the animals that live in it and near it. It's also bad news for us. A recent study from the University of Georgia estimated that 8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the ocean every year. That's like putting 5 bags filled with plastic on every foot of coastline in the world. That's a lot of plastic in the ocean, and it's there because, well, we put it there. The 5 most common items found during the International Coastal Cleanup are plastic cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic beverage bottles, plastic bottle caps, and plastic straws and drink stirrers. Notice anything in common with those? It's a lot of single-use, disposable plastic. It goes without saying, we produce too much waste. That waste ends up in the ocean when we litter or don't recycle. Plastic is an important part of our modern lives. We use it for a lot of good things. But we need to take responsibility for how much we use every day and where it goes when we're done with it. The 3 R's can help, and it's up to every single one of us to practice them. Reduce your use of disposable plastic. That's anything you use once and throw away. Just use less. Reuse disposable plastics when possible. A plastic bottle makes a great coin piggy bank or watering can. The possibilities are endless. Recycle anything that can be recycled so it stays out of landfills, where trash can blow away. Ocean plastic is a huge problem that's only going to get worse. Unless we change our ways, we can do better for the ocean and for us. Why is plastic marine debris so common? We know there's trash in the ocean. Unfortunately, a lot of it is plastic. We find plastic everywhere, from the ocean floor to surface. The plastics are all shapes and sizes and all different types. We find plastics on beaches, and also inside animals' stomachs or wrapped around their bodies. That's bad news for our ocean and the animals that live in it and near it. It's also bad news for us. A recent study from the University of Georgia estimated that 8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the ocean every year. That's like putting 5 bags filled with plastic on every foot of coastline in the world. That's a lot of plastic in the ocean, and it's there because, well, we put it there. The 5 most common items found during the International Coastal Cleanup are plastic cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic beverage bottles, plastic bottle caps, and plastic straws and drink stirrers. Notice anything in common with those? It's a lot of single-use, disposable plastic. It goes without saying, we produce too much waste. That waste ends up in the ocean when we litter or don't recycle. Plastic is an important part of our modern lives. We use it for a lot of good things. But we need to take responsibility for how much we use every day and where it goes when we're done with it. The 3 R's can help, and it's up to every single one of us to practice them. Reduce your use of disposable plastic. That's anything you use once and throw away. just use less. Reuse disposable plastics when possible. A plastic bottle makes a great coin piggy bank or watering can. The possibilities are endless. Recycle anything that can be recycled so it stays out of landfills, where trash can blow away. Ocean plastic is a huge problem that's only going to get worse. Unless we change our ways, we can do better for the ocean and for us.
What is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Well, first, let's talk about what it's not. It's not a floating island of trash like a garbage dump or a landfill. It's also not the only patch. They exist all throughout the ocean, and the Pacific Garbage Patch just happens to be the most famous. Garbage patches are large areas of marine debris concentration that are formed by rotating ocean currents called gyres, kind of like big whirlpools that suck things in. A garbage patch is made up of tiny plastic pieces called microplastics that are less than 5 millimeters long. It's more like pepper flakes swirling in a soup than something you can skim off the surface. You might come across some larger items like plastic bottles, but it's possible to sail through a garbage patch and not see anything. And they're a big problem for the ocean and us. People often ask why we can't just scoop up all the marine debris in the ocean. And the answer is, unfortunately, it's just not that simple. The first challenge is the sheer size of these garbage patches. They're huge. They're constantly moving with ocean currents. And there's debris from the ocean surface all the way down to the sea floor. Not to mention all the marine life we would disrupt if we tried to just scoop up debris. So what can we do? Well, the ultimate solution is prevention. And we need to keep that as our highest priority. We can reduce, reuse, and recycle to keep trash out of the ocean in the first place. And we can participate in things like shoreline cleanups. It's a lot easier to deal with debris before it gets to the ocean. Because until we stop marine debris at the source, we'll just be cleaning it up forever.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi everybody, and now for your marine forecast. Starting out with our sea ice edge today, it's all open water for all that wind fetch to bring the water up against the beach, and the ice edge is pretty far offshore. For our true color image this afternoon, we've got that storm that was old typhoon Merbach, and it's really wound up and doing what it's supposed to do. We had a marine report earlier today of 80 miles an hour out in the ocean and 52-foot seas. Starting out with Saturday's marine forecast for the inside waters, northerlies 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 3 feet. On the outside, a very mixed direction, 10 to 15 knots and seas up to 8 feet. And then for Sunday, it looks like some westerlies get going here, and 15 to 20 knots on the outside with seas up to 9 feet. And on the inside, variable directions, 5 to 15 knots, seas up to 3 feet. And then for the south central, again, variable directions on the outside, 15 knots, seas up to 7 feet. But for Cook Inlet, we've got southerlies 25 to 30 knots and seas up to 8 feet. And then on Sunday, again, 10 to 15 knots on the outside, including Prince William Sound, and 10 to 15 knots for Cook Inlet. And then for the Alaska Peninsula, 30 knots on the Bering Sea side, and southwesterlies, seas up to 19 feet. But on the Gulf side, we got about 20 knots and seas up to 14 feet. And then for Sunday, variable winds about 10 knots, seas up to 7 feet. That swell takes a while to lay down. And then southerlies 20 to 25 knots on the outside, seas up to 9 feet. For the peninsula, wind ranging from about 15 to 25 knots, generally on the southwest, seas up to 16 feet. And then for Sunday, we've got wind ranging 10 to 20 knots, seas up to 8 feet on the Bering Sea side and up to 7 feet on the Pacific side. Then looking at Saturday for the West Coast, we still have storm force going on with seas up to 26 feet, 45 to 55 knots. And then for Sunday, we've got on the Arctic coast, Saturday, we've got on the Arctic coast, we've got 55 knots out of the south down by the Bering Strait. But generally easterlies ranging from about 30 to 40 knots, up to 45 off of Kotzebue Sound, and seas up to 13 feet. And then for the Arctic slope, again, starting to circulate around that low with variable wind directions, 15 to 20 knots in the northern areas and 30 knots down by the Bering Strait, seas up to 12 feet. So recapping tonight's weather, very strong storm. In the Bering Sea, 956 millimars is weakening right near the Bering Strait. Front wrapped around it, causing precipitation across western Alaska. Also, we've got a triple point down by the Kenai Peninsula and bringing some onshore rain there. Weak high pressure for the southeast Alaska. And then Saturday, that front is really starting to fall apart, but the low is holding together at 959 millibars. Also a little weak system south of Dutch Harbor. And that system is not going to develop a whole lot. But again, that strong southwest flow into Norton Sound really driving the water onto the beach there. And that's why all the high wind warnings and coastal flood warnings are out. And so for Sunday, now that low develops near the Pribilos, about 10 millibars, strong high pressure south of the Gulf of Alaska, and then the old storm is now got a few gale force around it, but 989 millibars off of Point Hope, and rain over most of the mainland portion of the state. And again, looking at all of those warnings, we've got a lot of coastal flood warnings. And we have one coastal flood watch for the North Slope, and then we do have high wind warnings still in effect. Please stay tuned to the weather and contact your local emergency management for instructions, and please stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.